All right, we got Mike Sarraille here, man. Thank you for coming in. You got a new book. You broke a record, Navy SEAL. You've done everything. 20 years in special operations. The list goes on forever. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate that. There's a ton I haven't done. I have a long list of things I haven't done, and I'm getting a little antsy because, as we talked earlier, all these actors are dying. It's a realization that my clock is ticking as well.
Now, why do you think they're dying? And some other guys like Stallone that we were talking about and so on and so forth, they're just beating the test of time.
So you look at a Ray Liotta.
Yeah.
That guy smoked like a chimney. I'm sure he drank as well. I mean, that's the clear reason why those guys are dropping of heart disease. But then you look at a Sylvester Stallone. That guy takes care of himself. He has. Mm-hmm. And he's also using the advantage of peptides and science. Maybe he's taking it to the extreme because he's still jacked for his day.
Yeah. It's pretty big.
But, we talk a lot about just optimal performance. And I know we were talking earlier. If there is something out there with regards to peptides, NAD+, 1-testosterone, which we talked about has gotten a bad rap. Well, what are the cons if you don't use testosterone? You're opening yourself up to so many things like coronary disease, and you don't heal as well. And so working with a guy named Dr. Kirk Parsley, he's been pivotal, and this is recently. This is like the last 3 months. This has been pivotal to my health because I was in a bad way going into 777 and even coming out. And we did my blood. He's got me on a protocol, and then working with a guy named John Wellborn, not from your hometown, but played for your Eagles.
Go Birds.
Go Birds. And those two, John handles the workouts. Kirk handles my blood work. And it's been, I'm feeling so much better.
And it's got to be big pharma behind it, like they're behind everything else, right? Because who else, as a doctor, you go to medical school for a gazillion years, you have to know that this is more helpful than A, B, C, D, or E. But you got the guy coming in with the kick up, this, that, the other. Oh, no, stay away from that. Look at this, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll give you examples. Let's just say testosterone, for example. But they're talking about guys who are taking, obnoxious amounts and then go, think that their wife is cheating on them, and they go up at like a Navy SEAL like you in a camp. I had a friend that did that. He was taking way too much, and he thought his wife was cheating on him. He really did. He went in camo. And we were, I was like, Dale, you're starting to get a little cuckoo here. And he climbed up in a tree with the shit under him and everything and waited. Long story short, he ended up ripping off the door to the house, and he went in, and his wife was just in there taking a bath, and she's like, what are you doing? So you have that one in however many that go insane like that, and then they use that against you. But other than that, when you look at real research, like PubMed,
yes,
the doctors you talk to that are actually acting like doctors like they went to be, what else could it be?
You go into life hoping, or at least in your younger years, that things aren't affected by big money, and they are. And to your point with the friend, yeah, too much of anything is not a good thing, except for baseball. Anyone says what are the greatest years?
Well, yeah,
Canseco,
McGuire.
Best year of baseball ever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Best year of baseball
watch, ever. Nothing against baseball, but to me it's boring as hell. But then those years you would watch, I'd watch it like crazy. You would just wait for who's up next to crack one, and then they're pitching 110 miles an hour for 9 innings.
Baseball has declined since then. It's almost like boxing with Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
There's been no singular figure that has come in and just driven fans to boxing.
Man, nobody's like Mike.
Nobody. The question is there going to be another Mike Tyson?
I don't see it. But I could tell you one thing, that Fury, he can take some fucking hits, though. I always bring that up.
Look at him, though. That's what kills me.
I know.
He looks like a Slav almost.
The funniest, he comes out and he wiggles his belly, and then he's fighting like a guy like Deontay Wilder, who has that one punch.
Chisels.
And he's just taking blow after blow. And we watched it a bunch of times, and when Fury went down, you have to, Wilder had to be like, what is going on here? This guy just got up 3 times and then beat him and then crushed him the last 2 times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just nuts.
I think the point to take there is don't judge a book by its cover. Appearances mean nothing. You talk about the SEAL teams. Hollywood perpetuates a certain mythology, and I'm sure we'll get into the reality of the SEALs. And everything is my perspective and my perspective only. But, usually the Hollywood actor is this chiseled guy, or it's The Rock. I remember The Rock played a SEAL in one movie. Usually it was lanky guys, and those guys were usually the most dangerous, like the guys that actually knocked me out a couple times to the point where I just shut my mouth. And it was never the big guys, man. Never the big guys.
I didn't think we'd have to go there first. Can you pull up tab 2?
Yep.
But these 2 Blackhawks that went down today, you know, and another train derailment. Now, when you see this as a SEAL, you know, are they, and not putting anyone down, are they not given enough training, or how does something like this happen?
You know, if you trace back to the history of the U.S. military, casualties in training are not unique. Mm-hmm. When you are training hard, and let me step back. When we train, the thing I respect about the military that I think the civilian world can learn a lot from is we are so good at mitigating risk. We have these things called ORMs, operational risk management. It's a prescriptive checklist you have to go down to make sure that you're taking all the right steps in training. Even in combat, I've done this, 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 and this so that we are as safe as possible, even though we're going to train hard. And so, you know, these 2 pilots were training hard. I'm assuming they collided. I haven't seen all the details yet.
Scroll down a little bit, Rob. Yeah, I was watching this morning. Yeah, 9 people were killed in a crash involving 2 Army Black Hawk helicopters conducting nighttime training exercise in Kentucky. Yeah, basically what you said. But I always look at it like, is the government not putting enough money into the military that they're not training them enough, or this is just a thing that happens and it's just the way it is.
You know, I'm going to say these things just happen. I don't know comparatively what the hard numbers are, but we outspend every other country in the world in defense spending. We are the most technologically advanced. Our soldiers today, and I don't play what I call the generation game. Mm-hmm. Our soldiers today are better than we were. That's the whole point. And I remember coming in, you know, in '98 we still had Gulf War vets that had some choice words about my generation. I learned very quickly every generation does it to the next. These guys are awesome. You talk about the Navy SEALs today, these guys are better than we are because they have the luxury of better technology, of better training, smarter training, and all the lessons that we had to learn on the battlefield. And you know, if you want to look at an example of that, do you remember Operation Eagle Claw? It would have been 1980. It was, you know, if you've seen it, it's usually the Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter authorized a rescue for I believe it was 52 Americans. Mm-hmm. And I think the true reason that Carter wanted to do it was he needed help with the election. And if it went successfully, it would have been a boost in the election against Reagan. But it was a catastrophic failure. They landed in a desert logger site. A C-130 collided with, I believe, which was a MH-53. 8 Americans were killed. But that's known as a watershed moment in special operations history because there's still lessons that are implemented today from that one failure. And in fact, that was the operation that led to the creation of the Joint Special Operations Command, which is the finest counterterrorism unit in the world.
I actually find that amazing what you just said, because I think the general public, I don't know about you, Tom, but the general public thinks opposite. You know, that our military has gone down the hill. You hear it all the time. I hear people talk about it. We're not the strongest country in the world anymore. We're this. From your perspective, if, God forbid, there was a war, big time war with Russia or China like that, do we still have the best military on this planet that will fuck shit up? I guess
there's no other way to say it there, to fuck shit up. Let's not mince words here. What is the purpose? I had a great colonel in the Marine Corps. I didn't know him personally, but he said it to a group of us young Marines. He said, hey, we are in the profession of peace, trained in the art of war. And what that means when we're called upon is we go forward and we kill the enemy without mercy and break all their things. And then we go home. That's what it is. To the point of your question, we're seeing some interesting things here. Did you see Saudi Arabia? They're entering into an agreement with Iran, Russia, North Korea, and China, and they're also coming off the U.S. dollar. So there's some very concerning things going on right now. But if you look at the United States paired with Canada and the United Kingdom and New Zealand and Australia and all the NATO countries, I think we would At the end of the day, it would be a brutal war. Yes, we would win. But the American fighting man is no different than 1776. Are there fewer of them? Yeah. I think there's an argument to be made there, is that fewer people are raising their hands. They've lost sight of why you should love this country. We've become entitled. We've become lazy. And people lack perspective. The things we're arguing about. And I think that's the most dangerous thing, is the most dangerous message we can send to the world is that we are a nation divided, and we are a nation divided. But people lack perspective, and the things that they think are these hot turn issues are not. They are trivial, and people need to grow the fuck up and focus on what's important. And I think a lot of people have trouble with the fact that they are not the most important thing in the world. I am not the most important thing in the world. I'm a cog in this large wheel known as the United States. And I have to have the ability to put my needs aside for the good of the nation. But these arguments about like this 1% of the population that are dominating the headlines shouldn't, in my opinion. Again, everything I say is my opinion, and I have been wrong a lot.
This episode is brought to you by Let's Get Checked. Are you the man your father was? Recent studies have shown that men's testosterone levels have dropped substantially since the 1980s at about an average of 1% per year. Think about how old your father was when he was born. For example, if he was 30, your testosterone levels could be 30% lower than his. Low testosterone levels can have all type of health effects on men. It can affect your mood, sex drive, memory, muscle mass loss, you name it. And yes, low testosterone is more common the older you get, but it can affect men at any age. So let's talk about today's sponsor, Let's Get Checked. You can order a testing kit that will be delivered to you in a discreet packaging with next-day delivery. Once your sample arrives in the laboratory, confidential results will be available from your secure online account within 2 to 5 days. So, if you want to test your hormone levels without having to leave your home, visit trylgc.com/MSCS Media and get 25% off your test using the code MSCS Media. The link is in the description at the top. This episode is brought to you by Manscaped.com. Breaking news, Manscaped now sells beard products. That's right, they are once again revolutionizing men's grooming with brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shave your signature beard look. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to Manscaped.com and using code MSCS Media for 20% off and free shipping. No one likes a weird beard, so say goodbye to all the stubble trouble with Manscaped's Pro Beard Kit. It all starts with the Beard Hedger. This thing is a monster of fixing faces. First off, this cordless trimmer has a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard. No more messing around in drawers, this color one, that color one, all with one guard. Plus, it's waterproof, so you can shave in the shower and avoid all that hair in the sink. The Pro Kit doesn't end there, though. First, there's the beard shampoo and conditioner. You need to remember your hair is different. Next, Manscaped's beard oil. Cap it off with beard balm. The Pro Kit also comes with 3 different gifts: a beard brush, comb, and scissors to ensure your beard is ready to impress. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code MSCS Media at Manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at Manscaped.com. Use the code MSCS Media. Manscaped Beard Hedger, 1 stroke, 1 guard, 20 lengths. Link is in the description below. See, until you said that, I would have bet any amount of money that if I put 3 million people in here and say, hey, do you think if we went against China right now, we would win? Hell no. Whoever, even Russia, hell no. To me, this is just my opinion. I don't know anything. I'm sitting across from a Navy SEAL. But for me to even think that Russia is doing their best right now for Ukraine, to me, that's a joke. I mean, I can't imagine that. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think 99% of people would say the U.S. military is weak now. We're in trouble because you hear about the splash cards, timeout cards. Then, as you said earlier, with other things, everything's given. Like we always talk about it. Especially the younger kids coming up, everybody gets a fucking trophy.
Yeah.
How do you go with that? But it's good to hear from you that we are that strong. And I knew. You could see it a million miles away that China was going to align with them.
Yeah.
They've been waiting their whole life to become world power. They just have patience beyond patience.
So if you look and you say, the U.S. military is weak, the fact that Saudi Arabia just passed on us to align with China is not an indicator that the military is weak. It's that our leadership is weak.
Good.
We have ceded, the greatest, the most powerful man in the world, the United States president. We have ceded that title. We were always the best country with regards to leadership. We led the way for the world. And where we expect our leadership to be the very best, the National Capital Region, also known as Washington, D.C., we see the exact opposite. And so it's not the military, it's our leadership. And when leadership tries to take these civilian or civil progressive policies and sort of impose them on the military, guys, don't worry. I went on Fox News, and I think it was with Pete Hegseth, and he's like, hey, is this making our military weak? I'm like, hey, I still know a lot of the leaders, both senior enlisted and officers that are in the military today, namely the SEALs. And I appreciate, saying a SEAL I know about national defense. I really don't. I served 20 years. I served in the global war on terror, saw combat at the tactical level, but at the strategic level, I wouldn't call that a strength. But the men serving today basically get this policy passed on them. They make sure that their soldiers are in compliance. Yes, we've done the don't ask, don't tell training, the transgender training, and they move on to the actual training for war. So they do it very quickly. They're not, again, they're making sure that they're compliant. They're not disregarding the commander-in-chief, but they know what to keep the main thing, and that's making sure that we're prepared for war. And these guys are awesome. So for those that may have any doubts about our military power, don't.
That's a great way to say it. It's the leader. It's the leader, not the military. It's who's leading. Now, what do you think other countries that we've always been at battle with, what do you think they think of us? Do they still know, hey, look, be careful. Or do you think they're like, now's the time to make every fucking move we can?
Oh, of course, because we've laid the table for them. And when we are divided, think about it. It's no different than when your mom and dad were going at it. If you had a house with a mom and dad, and those 3 days they're just back and forth. That's when you try to get away with everything.
Right.
Where you could sneak out at 12 because they're so exhausted arguing with each other. Yeah, it's no different. The problem with the global war on terror was while we were so front sight focused on that for 20 years, China was building their military. Mm-hmm. They were buying up ports around the world, stuff like that.
Yeah. And we were borrowing money. Here, you want 20 million, 20 trillion? Here you go. No interest.
Bro, stop running this country like it's an endless bank account. This is why we need leaders that were former business leaders that understand you don't spend money you don't have. If this was a business, the United States would have went out of business a long time ago.
Long time ago. Now, he's got the borders wide open, and you were involved a lot with the terror. Is everyone blind? Like, what do you think? It's just drugs coming through? It's just people coming through? Can you imagine the amount of terrorists that are just walking right through in here? I mean, to me, that's a big concern to me. I mean, it's a free for all.
I wake up in the morning like I'm still in a dream. There's a lot of things that don't make sense to me. Closing the border is it's such a black and white issue to me. It doesn't make sense. So this is a disaster, and my the Homeland Defense Secretary needs to go away. They need to close off that border. Yes, human trafficking, drugs. We know about the fentanyl. The funny thing is this is tied to the 2A. One, don't ever go against the 2A community. You've seen that. Mm-hmm. The Second Amendment community, you do not go against the 2A community. No. And I do believe in the right to bear arms. It was framed in the Constitution for a reason, to go against big government that becomes corrupt. And, you talk about the military. If China has any, and I got this from a guy named Andy Stumpf, who went and found the figures or had somebody on his podcast, but he said, if China ever dared to step foot in our nation, they don't have to worry about the U.S. military. They need to worry about the 2A community. He said alone in Texas, there's something like 10 million hunting tags. In South Carolina, there's like 600,000 hunting tags. So the 2A community is also part of our national
security,
defense.
basically,
yes.
Right?
But here, if you were to take away guns, all you'd be handing to the cartel is another industry to capitalize on, and they would start pushing guns across the border and create a whole different. There's a black market for guns. It would just increase that black market substantially.
Yeah, they're not going to go away.
No.
So from your perspective, what is their agenda? We obviously to divide and then to lean on the government for everything. The Second Amendment, that's for sure. They've been trying that though since Trump left. Just to be honest,
Yeah.
Like, what is their ultimate agenda with all this nut shit? It's not just one thing. It's just piles of things.
How have we gotten, I think a great question is, how have we gotten so far from our core fundamentals?
Social media.
Yeah. And the media as a whole.
Yeah.
If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Never the good stories. Not about these 2 cops in Nashville that just set the bar for all police departments across the nation.
Don't hear about that.
Those 2 should be, one, whatever the main street in Nashville is down the road.
I just had a great conversation. I used to work in the news. I was a TV cameraman, go out to all the terrible murders and scenes, and did it for 10 years and just wore on me after a while. But I used to always propose doing the community stories, the fun stories too, right? The stuff people want to see. And I just had a good conversation with a reporter yesterday that I used to work with, and I said, how have things been? And she said, it's all right, and you could tell it's not. And we were talking about the whole leading, if it leads, it bleeds, like you just said. People are tired of the negativity. If you keep throwing negativity, that's what you live in that world. Like you said, show the positives. Stop talking about the shooter. Talk about the guys who saved lives. Talk about those people. Lead with that. But they won't do it because it keeps you in this negative state.
Ratings.
Ratings, too.
People are so fucking miserable.
Yeah.
And so I just had Stephen Kotler. He's written like 14 books, 11 bestsellers. He just wrote a book called In Our Country, which if you were over the age of 40, you need to pick this up because he talks about the superpowers of aging and how actually life can be great and you can learn new things. But he looked at data. People that are overly positive or just, let's say, positive in nature live 7.5 years longer than those that are negative. So for the health of our nation, you need to put positive stories. We don't hide from the bad. But to your point, I don't know what their agenda is. It makes no sense to me that you would shut down the energy sector domestically when, we're having issues with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Cooperation Councils that have so much of the oil. It seems like they sit around the table in the White House and say, okay, everyone, what is the worst idea we can come up with? And once they're like, oh, that's horrible, let's go with that. Let's lead with that. And I'm trying to look inward and saying, am I the problem? Have I not evolved? Am I not seeing something? But I keep coming back to the point of like, no, I just can't see it. I can't see why they're making the decisions that they're making. And it's like they want to divide this nation. Government. I'm right of center. I'm socially moderate. I grew up in San Francisco. We're very tolerant. Fiscally conservative. I probably align more with the Libertarian Party in that I believe in small government. Reagan said it best. The 9 most dangerous words in the English. I'm with the government. I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Government will move. So government is not formed off meritocracy. The private sector is. And God bless, was it Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks yesterday in front of Congress? He's like, I earned my billion. He gave the history of where he came from, federally subsidized housing. And he's like, you want to put a moniker on me? Let me be very clear. I earned all that money. That's the American way. But government is mediocre. It's mediocrity at its best, not meritocracy. And the private sector will always solve everything more efficiently and effectively and for less money. I mean, Elon Musk is a perfect example with SpaceX. We need to minimize our government. We need to get rid of things like the VA. The VA is filled with good people, but privatize that side of the medicine. There's just so many things that is just government employees expect a paycheck. Not all of them. There's some good ones there, and I don't want to paint in broad strokes, but I did serve in government for 20 years, so I do have an opinion on this. There are some people that just come in, collect their paycheck, and don't really contribute towards making the country a better place.
And we always talk about all the time. I mean, my personal opinion, and I don't know if Tommy agrees with this or not, but I'm tired of, and I think a lot of people consider themselves in that middle. You may lean a little more left, you may lean a little more right. In my opinion, I'm a 38-year-old male. Get rid of the D, get rid of the R in front of the name, get rid of it, and just give me what you're for, what you're against, and let's vote that way. Because people align themselves, it's like a sports team. Go Eagles, go Birds, right? I'm not going to the Cowboys or any of those teams. If you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, that's your team, right? I can't vote against him because, he's a Republican, or I can't vote against him because he's a Democrat. Why? That doesn't mean they're good. Get rid of those. That's just my opinion. Get rid of those DNRs and vote for the person.
These organizations have become so powerful. I do believe, and I know there's efforts to create a center party, the centrists, which needs to happen. But what people, again, fail to realize is that you're on Team America first.
Correct.
But it seems like we identify everyone in, hey, that guy's blue, that guy's red. Yep. If he's blue, I'm not going to help him. If he's red, screw that guy.
Well, look how many letters, BLM, J, G, K, Q. I mean, they got a new letter every day. It's just, and I believe it was Michigan. They just graduated, and they said, like when we graduate, we all go out, graduate, party, have a good time. Well, they separated it. If you're black, you go with your black. If you're white, this. If you're BL, whatever letter it is, you go with them. They separated the whole thing. They took it all away. And I'll tell you what, we had Stephen Greer in. Very interesting guy. And as we talked to him for a long time, he went through everything. And he was like, this has been going on since the 40s. And the guy's starting to, he makes a lot of sense. Fear, continuous fear, all the way from whatever happened in the 40s with the bomb to 9/11 to COVID to this to the UFO shit now and everything. It's the fear, which is... It's starting to make more and more sense.
Sometimes it's better to be feared than love. I understand that approach to keep the people, keep the people fearful, and they'll be dependent on you. But I hate to use such a simplistic example, but maybe growing up in San Francisco, like we're past the whether you're black, you're white, you're yellow, you're Hispanic, like, and where it's reinforced, and this was really sort of. Now that I reflect on it, I'm like, it really was great. Because in Marine boot camp, they tell you, all of you, you're all equally worthless. We don't care what you look like, who you love. And it is miserable. I remember you get one phone call, like I think it's like within the first few hours to tell your parents that you've arrived or your next of kin or whoever your dependent is. And I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, I think I made a huge mistake. She's like, well, you're in it now. She's like, get it done. But there's this huge black kid from Louisiana and this guy with, the protruding jaw from Oklahoma that just is like the total hick. And like everyone came from all places, all races, all religions. And it's amazing how when you're in such hardship, nobody cares about that. But that black kid from Louisiana reached out and gave me his hand when I was down and needed help. And all you look at them and you're like, hey, brother, thanks.
How cool is that?
Again, it comes back to the fact that Americans are so comfortable. I mean, we talk about it, and I talk about it in the book.
Yeah.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Pull up tab 3, because it's a good time to talk about it.
It's so true. And America does not want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. When we grew up in Philly, we would go to Philly games, and it didn't matter what color you were. If you were going for the Philly, I mean, now I'm not such a big fan. Donald McNabb, he pissed me off back then when I was all there and lost a lot of money on that one. Prick. But it didn't matter. We were all boys, like even in North Philly, where like, you were taking a risk to go in there to North Philly. It was a little dangerous. But even then, if you're a Philly fan, nobody cared. They separated this. And to your book real quick, as I was talking to you before we came on, I looked at it and I thought, this is like an action book, guys jumping off shit, he's got a bush over his head and blasting people away, which you did do, but, but I read it and you go through it and it's a couple things that had stuck out to me was everybody's the victim. Everybody's the victim. I'm 15 pounds overweight. You go to the doctor. Here's some pills. I'm depressed. Here's some Klonopin. You have anxiety now. Here, take this, and this. And then one day when you might want to get off of it, now take this, and this. And the book, to me, this is what I got from it, is you incorporated your time in the service and also just in life and how you can mentally get strong enough to get over these things without pills or without not that therapists are bad, but without paying a therapist $400 a clip or whatever the hell it is, you know what I mean? And so on and so forth. So what sparked you to write a book like this and elaborate on it, and 50% and half of the profit from it, you donate to the vets, right?
Yeah. It's a lot of things to sort of get into there. I've gotten some interesting feedback, either testimonials, online or notes via social
Mike,
media.
I got to tell him quick.
Yeah.
Terry Bradshaw reviewed his book. If you scroll down,
Oh, really?
we're big Terry.
Oh, dude.
Yeah. Scroll down. Rob will love this. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Terry Bradshaw. Look.
I love that guy.
Sammy Hagar too.
Oh,
Shit.
dude, say the Red Rocker, man.
Yeah,
the Red
dude.
Rocker.
You got some monsters on there as reviews.
Terry Bradshaw, the everyday warrior, is a refreshing change from the status quo and an honest look into what it takes to succeed. Mike shows readers how to develop the mindset of a champion. Better yet, a warrior.
And he doesn't bullshit.
awesome.
That's one guy that doesn't. So I'm pulling that up because, you're not going to be disappointed with this book. I mean, look, you got monsters on there, buddy.
So funny
Unless
enough,
they're afraid you're going to kill him.
oh no,
I'm just kidding.
Terry Bradshaw's a big. Well, first off, Tim Kennedy. I'm not gonna. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
the
just
guy
joking.
will pummel me.
I'm just joking.
He's still a beast. He's still. Oh, Tim Kennedy is a beast. So a guy did send me a note. Was it? I think on Instagram. He said, "Hey man, I was really disappointed in the book. There was no war stories." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm not going to do that." Like, so one, SEALs have a very bad reputation amongst all the Green Berets and the MARSOC guys and everything. They're like, "Hey, you writing a book?" But yeah, in fact, I am, and it has nothing to do with war. I can't do that. And even within our community, it's frowned upon if you write. We call it the "I Love Me" book. So there I was, surrounded in grenade bins, all alone against 20 enemy insurgents. Everything I did in the SEAL teams was as a team. Everything I did in Marine Recon was as a team. I was so proud to be surrounded by amazing men and women that were better than me. And when you can truly operate as a team, and that doesn't mean you got to get along, but when you can truly operate as a team, there's nothing you guys can't do. When someone says impossible, we're like, you mean improbable. We'll prove you wrong. And Americans have shown that. Don't tell Americans something can't be done. And that's what, when people come down on America, we have a history of smacking people in the face when they say we can't do something.
Well, you brought up Elon Musk. Look, we've been trying to go up there for how long? He decides to build a rocket. This thing goes up, down, and is reusable. In a couple of years, this guy does it. No, you can't do that, Elon. It went up, all the way up, and came back down, and it's reusable. It's a perfect example of what you're saying.
And he's villainized for it.
Yeah.
For following the American dream, the embodiment of it. And he's villainized by it's always the cowards that just wait for the big man to fall, and they take such grace in it because they've got nothing else. And you talk about the victimhood. But, I also got a note from a woman who did not like the victimhood category, and she called me a white entitled man. And I responded, I'm like, hey, that actually hits home. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm not talking about any race or anything. I'm just talking about victimhood. Now, you talk about everyone gets a trophy, and again, there's some dangerous narratives out there perpetuated by, I say left to center, and it's not about politics, but there's a lot of bad narratives that because someone else has so much, that's the reason you have so little. Or it's not your fault. It's someone else's fault. Because you're overweight, it's not your fault. It's the food. It's all processed food. Then don't eat processed food. Mm-hmm. This is so simple. So victimhood is a mindset, much like being a warrior is a mindset. And the reason I called it Everyday Warriors, some people are like, well, and again, I've gotten feedback. They're like, hey, I'm not a warrior. I'm like, no, you absolutely can be. Do you consider yourself a warrior for your family, for your kids, for your community, for whatever your cause is? If it's a warrior for a social cause, you can be a warrior. It's a mindset. I mean, even Bruce Lee said an average man with a laser-like focus is a warrior. Mm-hmm. And I've met single moms of like 2 kids that came out really wrong. I've met a lot of single moms. I'm talking single moms with kids who have grinded and just sacrificed all their needs to give their kids a better life. Those are warriors. Yeah. And even in the military, there's a difference between a want and a warrior. I met a lot of war fighters that are good at war, but maybe lacked some integrity. And at the end of the day, like, would you want that guy, would you hand that guy your money or let him take care of your, watch after your wife? Absolutely not. And so if they fall in that category, I don't consider them a warrior. But this victim, it went viral on Fox, and a lot of bad comments from people. But we've got to break this. This is the worst epidemic facing our nation today. Is social media sort of escalates this, that people find it very easy to fall into this victim category. Because on social media, if you say, hey, I failed and I'm really hurt, and people are like, oh, it's okay. It's not your fault. And so you've just given affirmation that it's okay to not put any more effort and then it's somebody else's fault. So what do they do the next day? Oh, I'm feeling so down and I failed again. People do the same thing, affirmation. It's not your fault. It's okay. And so people stay in that victim category for way too long, if not life.
When did you see that starting? Like, when did you really notice it?
Because I went through it. Yeah. When I transitioned out, and I left Virginia Beach, I ended up in Austin, Texas, at the University of Texas Naval ROTC for my last tour. One of them by myself. I'd lost a lot of buddies, and I fell into a black hole. And it was probably the darkest times, drinking a lot, out in town, fighting, and nothing was my fault. People are like, hey, you're better than this. And I would always go back, well, it was the war, something's off, something's wrong, it's not me. No, it was me. And it was clearly a choice I could make, and I should have made it earlier. But it was two good people in my life, a guy named Dr. Chris Free, renowned clinical psychologist that has dedicated his life to veterans and pulling guys out of this hole. I mean, he was at my wedding. And then my current wife, who was a smoke show. And I'm batting way out of my league. She lost her father when
sorry to hear that.
When she was 18. Tragic overdose. Yeah. And she's suffered some darkness in her life, and we fell quickly, and she gave an ultimatum because she saw something on my body that she's like, if you keep doing that, we're done. And I made that choice to get back to the old Mike. Because, I also was struggling when you leave the SEAL teams, which is like one of the strongest support mechanisms in the world. And it's no different than like a guy leaving the NFL or an organization they've been with 20 years. You lose that. You lose part of your DNA. The natural question is, who am I without the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah.
Who is John Welborn? Who is Mike Sarraille without the SEALs? And it just wasn't an easy question for me to answer. So I had to make a very conscious decision to get back to the guy that just got things done, that gets shit done, makes shit happen, and does it all again tomorrow.
And then, in the book, it goes through it, but how did you do that? Because you like I said, you get out from not just the military. I mean, at the top, okay? You get out. Now you're walking around with normal people. You hear a bang, this, that, the other. We had a friend that committed suicide. He was a Marine sergeant, lost 2 guys. He couldn't go back and get the bodies. It was the Cold War, right?
He had to leave.
He had to leave them. And from that, he worked for me at an engineering firm. Really good guy. Really, really good guy.
Blamed himself the whole time.
Blamed himself the whole time. I was really close with him, and I could see him going downhill. He worked at the VA. The VA was everything to him.
Such good people there.
And when COVID happened, they cut his overtime, and then he went off the rails. And the last time, like, he would come in and talk about some of the things, and he could just not let that go, that he couldn't. And I don't understand, but I feel for him. He couldn't let it go that he couldn't bring those bodies home. So one night he calls me, and he made a mistake. He was drinking a lot, and that was it. And they never did anything to help him. He came home and they're just like, here, John, here's life. We know you were stuck in the forest for 6 months and this and that, but here you go. So like when you came out, did you have anxiety? Did you have depression? I saw a stat that it was I assume it has to do with COVID, that in 2021, half of Americans, had reported, anxiety, depression, blah, blah, blah. So for you, you were to overcome the difficultness of that. It's also in the book. But how did you mentally do that without hammering Klonopin or Xanax? I mean, do you think that should be taken, or do you think you should just mentally get over it, or like?
I'm struggling here because I just had somebody on my podcast. Again, another renowned Harvard psychologist who has done a lot of data into the keto diet, and keto diet has people that have strictly followed it, that had anxiety and depression, have seen amazing results where it almost disappears within a few weeks.
Really?
And then when they come off the diet, anxiety and depression come back. So he's pushing for more traditional, and he basically says mental health is a metabolic disease. There's 3 buckets: diabetes, obesity, heart disease. He says mental illness is also a I'm sorry, what did I just say? A metabolistic disease. So it's curable through diet, much like heart disease and diabetes. But, I did what a lot of veterans do. I fell into that easy category of like, I'm just going to drink and not actually put the work in to get back to health. And what it was those 2 people I just mentioned, my wife and Dr. Chris Free, but it was a former, I wouldn't say he was a commanding officer, but he was a senior officer at my command in Virginia Beach. He so happened to retire and be in Austin. And he basically said, he called me to lunch and totally blindsided me. And he said, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing?" Literally those words. And I said, "Dave, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "I'm hearing from people in San Francisco that you're doing these things out in town and you're not even retired yet." And he basically also said, he's like, "This isn't about you. That retirement you're about to get, you have 2 kids that are entitled to that retirement. Like, get out of your own head. Stop being so damn selfish. It's not about you. You still have a life to live for those in your life, and you need to provide for them." And it was like a aha moment. I'm like,
That's what
I didn't need anyone to tell me this. I know this. At what point did I lose my way? And we all lose our way. And to hear about your friend who struggled with leaving 2 guys behind on the battlefield, which happens.
Yeah.
It happens. You know what that's an indicator of? He's a good man.
Yeah.
And when veterans are struggling, and here's my theory on veterans and why they struggle. And there's a guy named Sebastian Younger who wrote a book called Tribe that every veteran should read before they leave. But he said, when you leave a culture that is defined by we over me, that believes in a little bit of conformity, which is not a bad thing. We still want people to be authentic themselves. But when you step back into a civilian culture that prides individuality over team, and you see the leaders of this nation arguing and can't conduct themselves with professionalism, civility, or tact, that is a culture shock for a lot of those vets. And we can't say that's the reason vets are killing themselves, but we just lost. This happened on, I believe, Monday. A guy named Mike Day. Mike Day was a SEAL, retired, shot 27 times. Shot 27 times on a combat mission.
27 bullets?
27 bullets.
Whoa.
And walked himself to the helicopter to get extracted in Iraq. The guy was awarded the Navy Cross, which is the highest second highest award for valor. But he just took his own life.
Sorry to hear that.
Well, and some people are like, "Oh, that's so selfish and weak." What Mike did for 20 plus years of his life was not selfish, and it was not weak.
Let's not forget about that.
Yeah, he fell on hard times. And for somebody to pull the trigger, I don't understand it, but damn, how much I'm searching for the right word. How much balls it takes to actually do that.
But remember, you got lucky and you got snapped out of it.
Yes.
Mike, what the fuck is going on? Maybe he didn't have that where what the fuck is going on, and another 10 years, maybe you could have.
And again, my condolences to Mike and his family.
Oh, yeah.
The guy was a warrior, and he fell on hard times. What I think we're worried about is this sense that guys can't reach out. And there's text streams amongst all the SEALs we serve with, like, "Hey fellas," and we reinforce to each other. "Hey, we all heard about Mike Day," and everyone is just, it's going to hit us hard. It is hitting us hard. And we reinforce, like, if this happens, one, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're weak. Just reach out, because we can't do anything if we don't know you're suffering. But the thing I know about this community and these type of men is they don't want to burden other people with their shit, and so they don't reach out. Like, I don't want to be a burden on other people. I do the same thing. Just asking for help is one of the most courageous things, and again, in a warrior culture, that is hard to do.
And I think it's okay to realize that not one of us sitting in this room, not one of us walking this earth is perfect. We all fuck up. We all go down bad routes. But I think, and you made the point here, but I think it's okay to fail, but in the sense that I failed, but damn, I got to learn from that failure. If you learn from it and change your ways, I tell my son, he plays football. You're going to win some battles, you're going to lose some battles. But the battles that you lose, what did that guy do to beat me? Okay, he's big, great. Did we make a move? Could I have got leverage on him? Learn from the mistakes. But we don't learn from the mistakes. We sit there and go, oh, it's not fair. Oh, he's bigger than me. Oh, this and that. Take that as a learning lesson. Failure is a good thing if you learn from it and change.
This episode is sponsored by Zbiotics. What is Zbiotics pre-alcohol probiotic? The Zbiotics pre-alcohol probiotic is a genetically engineered probiotic you drink before drinking alcohol to avoid that rough next morning and get back to living your life. PhD scientists invented it because they know the real problem is not dehydration. It's a toxic byproduct of alcohol, and Zbiotics pre-alcohol probiotic is the only product that breaks it down. Just remember to drink responsibly and plenty of rest too. Every time I have Zbiotics before drinking, I'm amazed at how good I feel the next day. Zbiotics is a must-have for me because it means I'm still going to make my daily workout even if I have a few drinks the night before. That's important to me. You can get Zbiotics for 15% off your first order using my code MSCS Media at checkout. I recommend getting the 6-pack. That's what I got. It's a great deal. You have a couple extra to share with friends. Go to zbiotics.com/MSCS Media. That's Z as in zebra, biotics, BIOTICS.com/MSCS Media, or scan the QR code on the screen right now and get 15% off your first order. You will not be sorry. Link is in the description below. This episode is brought to you by Fiji. More than just water.
This is not just rock. It's ancient volcanic rock that filters tropical rain, giving it double the electrolytes and its signature soft, smooth taste. It's not just water, it's Fiji water.
You just said it's in the book.
Yeah,
Failure is life's greatest mentor.
Yeah.
It is. Nobody likes to fail. And what I try to do in the book is reframe how you look at failure. One, failure is never acceptable. It should never be acceptable. But when it does happen, have your little tantrum, go get in the fetal position for an hour if that's what it requires. And I've been in the fetal position for an hour before. And then snap to, smile, and be like, okay, this is God in life trying to teach me a lesson. And to your point, what did I just learn from it? But so many people pass through that reflection process to actually learn and change things. What's the definition of insanity? Trying the same thing over and over again. But we are, again, you go back to society, people love just to see the man in the arena stumble and then they can laugh and point fingers, and less people are getting into the arena of life. Less people are risking it to learn.
Yeah.
Because, and I get it too, failure has two forms. It has internal factors and external factors. And most people fear the external factors of you laughing at me when I trip and get mud on my face. And people fear that. Don't. People will always, from the cheap seats, make comments. Yep. Like it was Joe Rogan that said it. He doesn't even read the reviews anymore.
Yeah, I stopped too. I turn the comments off everything. I don't even want to see it because no matter how much I might be strong-minded, I'll read that one thing and maybe it will bother me, maybe it won't, but my luck it will. And I'll fucking end up redoing the whole studio, and I'll dye my hair blonde, something nuts. So I just don't. Same thing he says, post and ghost. You know what I mean?
But there is, and we talk about it in the book. We call it the keyboard cowards. Some people call them the keyboard warriors. I'm like, don't use those words. Yeah. People can hide behind anonymity now, and it's so cowardly. There's a very nice woman named Allison Maloney. She's on Newsmax. And I went on and spoke to her, and some guy left a comment, and I couldn't, this is one of the things I need to work, like learn to respond, not to react. Well, I reacted on this one and basically said, hey, you must have not had good parents, because I don't know what mother would teach you to talk to a woman like that. And, I think I said something along the lines of, you must love this because you get to hide behind, anonymity again. And I would love to get your address, because I'll pay. And hey, that's not it's not a good way to open that up and say that violence is the answer to anything. But violence is also the answer to some things.
We always say it's got to be that guy with the blue and yellow nut huggers on, eating a bag of
Doritos.
chips. He's got chips, didn't shave his stomach in 10 years. That fat guy, and he's this, that, the other.
Well, it comes down to, we always talk about on this show too. Tommy always brings it up when we get into conversations about bullying. Right? We hear the word bullying thrown around, and everyone raises their kids differently. I get it. The way I raised my kids, my two boys, was if someone says something about you, or they lay their hands, let's just say they lay their hands on you, you defend yourself and you punch them in the mouth. And you may get your ass kicked. Maybe they're just way tougher. They may beat your ass, but you're going to get a fight, and you're going to get into that fight. Now it's like, well, just tell him to stop picking on me, or tell him that I'm wearing orange today, and orange is for bullying, so it's going to stop this kid from picking on me. No, teach kids to stand up for themselves, because then the bully will move on. And then he'll find the more weaker guy to keep going to. But these kids have no stand up for yourself anymore.
You've got to get over words quickly. Yep. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten better about that. Like, people are going to run off the mouth. And people's opinion of me is no concern of mine. Yep. I have no control. I try to conduct myself in a way that people have a positive interaction. But at the end of the day, if they're just negative, I've got to chalk that up and then move on. But the second somebody lays their hands on you, it's over. Mm-hmm. It's over. Not that you're going to win that fight, but you are forced to now retaliate. Mm-hmm. And what works in the schoolyard with that policy is no different than an international policy approach either. Look at it this way. You guys are tracking that 5 Americans were killed by a Iranian drone. They threw some data out. Now, I hope that the data is correct, that there have actually been 84 attacks against Americans, by Iranians over the last 2 years, and we've only retaliated. It's actually what?
It's probably 844.
Yeah. We've retaliated 4 or 5 times.
Unbelievable.
So, you're almost incentivizing their behavior by not reacting, and I think we've done that too often. When Obama drew the red line in the sand with Iran, and they crossed the red line and we did nothing. Yeah. You send a very clear message that we're not always going to follow through on what we say.
And for someone looking at this book, what would you say is one of the most important things that, you're a Navy SEAL, but it could change their life? Like, what, you can get the sample if you want before you buy it. Where would you say to go to say, just take a look at this? Believe me, you'll buy it.
So one, I talked about Hollywood and how they frame, special operations guys.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, if you could elaborate on that.
And so I say it early in the book, and there's a reason, one, that I give 50% of the profits to Folds of Honor and Special Operations Warrior Foundation. One, the most lethal warriors I knew that I served with in JSOC. One, I was lucky to even be there. I barely made the cut, but they were kind, empathetic, respectful. They wouldn't tell you about how many medals they won, how many people they've killed. They destroy that preconceived notion that people get from Hollywood. These are fathers. These are husbands. These are sons, brothers that conduct themselves with absolute empathy, and I was humbled to watch them on the battlefield. Now, how they conducted themselves and the lessons in the book, it is a collection of lessons I learned from watching these high performers, how they conducted themselves and sort of the mindsets, the foundational building blocks that they set through those habits, the positivity. I tried to put it into a framework that may help somebody. And so there's a lot of reflection in the book of asking yourself these questions. And I think it also frames that, hey, you're not supposed to figure this thing out called life. You can't. But what you're aiming for is optimal performance for as long as you can attain, and to continue growing. And that growth doesn't stop until you're 6 feet under. And if you could sort of build these foundational building blocks and approaches to obstacles and how to deal with failure and learn and move on, you're going to live a purpose-filled, impactful life. Now, happiness, I've got a lot of, sort of opinions on happiness. It's fleeting, but if I know I impacted people around me, that's going to provide me all the happiness I need post life.
And go to the next tab. and this is obviously very important to you. When did you start this?
The book.
No. Folds of Honor.
So this was actually started by Dan Rooney.
Okay.
Dan Rooney is like the ultimate human being. Professional golfer, F-18 pilot, or was it F-16? Fighter pilot. The guy he's written 2 books, phenomenal. He started Folds of Honor because a lot of military families were struggling with paying for the education of their children. So Folds of Honor specifically gives scholarships to families, kids and spouses that either lost their husband or father in the war, or whose husband or mother or wife are so disabled that they're having trouble working, they can't pay for the education of the kids. Over $200 million. And what I love about this organization as well is 91 cents on the dollar actually go to those scholarships. Only 9 cents is used for operational costs. So I call that putting your money where your mouth is.
Right. And you would be sick if you knew, I forget who it was. It might have been Tig or one of our CIA friends that we went through maybe, 30 of them? And we looked, like 30 like donation things like this, like the commercials.
Boz, I think it was.
Boz. Yeah, Boz Basil. Yeah, big CIA guy. He was in the Blacklist show after when he retired from the CIA. Now he's going and rescuing stolen children all over the world.
God bless him, dude.
Yeah, he's a monster too, and a really nice guy. Super fucking nice.
Isn't that awesome when you see these big guys who are just warriors, and they're the nicest people that can be?
Down to earth, you would never know. But when he left the CIA, because when he was doing all these ops, we kept seeing he was over there, and these children would look weird, So he was on to whatever his mission was, and it just stuck with him, and it kept bothering him, and then he resigned, and he went and opened up a whole foundation, and him. You wouldn't believe this, man. Him and Rick Prado, who was the head of the CIA, he was in. These older guys that are, 60s, 70s, they're going to like Nigeria and don't give a fuck. And they're going there, they have their guys staking out, and then they go and handle business. And they bring that kid back. And it's so cool to see that. But we had gone through all these commercials where, donate to the vets, do this, do that. And then you find out like 9 cents goes to them. Now, that is sick. I'm not a military vet, but just talking to you guys, and even if I didn't, that's just sick. It's just sick. So this goes 91% goes to where it's supposed to go.
Yes. And I think, Wounded Warrior was the famous case where like they were having these lavish galas, but 10 cents on the dollar were actually going to the programs. And they've hence come in, clean house, brought it, like completely fired all the leadership, and they've restored it. But there's too many veteran service organizations out there. Yeah. Way too many. But a lot of them have great intent. They're doing good work. But there's so much white noise. A lot of vets don't know where to go to find these services. And we've sort of made it convoluted for vets getting out.
We'll have all this in the description. Before I ask you about some cool stuff when you were a Navy SEAL, why, to go to the next step, why'd you pick skydiving? Rob, he broke the world Guinness World Record in skydiving, fastest in, 7 continents?
So yes, with my team.
You're obviously not with your team. You're obviously not bored post-military. Look what he did, this guy.
So
with your team.
I actually,
your team's 777.
I was getting bored. So building companies, dude, is the most horrible thing I've ever done. I would rather go to war than start another company. But I had a hip replacement, and I was sitting on the couch for basically like a month and a half. And so I went and skydived into Mount Everest. Not onto Everest, around Everest, but before I went to Everest, we started the planning on this. One, Andy Stumpf, who's a retired Navy SEAL, he's got a very popular podcast called Cleared Hot. And then in Navy, retired EOD senior enlisted Nick Cush, who lives in DeLand, Florida. And I said, hey, guys, this 777 concept, or known as 777, 7 continents, 7 days, 7 skydives, has been around for decades. And now it's become like, it can never be done. It's impossible. Improbable, right?
Probably.
And so Nick has the most experience of Andy and I, and he's also in the industry, the skydiving industry. And he was a little hesitant. He's like, let me make some calls. And he actually called a guy named Tom Noonan, who is like an icon in the industry. And when I was in Everest, November of 2021, Tom died trying to tandem somebody in from 41,000 feet, which requires oxygen. There was a problem with the oxygen and he basically had hypoxia, led to a heart attack, and he died. So we also did this in honor of Tom, but 18 months of planning. We had to raise $1.5 million. And it was, I remember I take a little Delta 9 when I go to bed because I've got sleep apnea. And I wake up on a Friday at 2:30 in the morning, and I'm deep in anxiety, and I'm like, I'm an imposter. This is gonna fail. And my wife wakes up, and my wife's like, hey, you've got this. You guys are like halfway with the fundraising. You've got a plan. She's like, and she sort of assuaged my concern right there. But I was real nervous going in. And then when we finally, Nick and I left early to go to South America to stage to receive the team, Nick looks at me and he's like, dude, we're actually going to do this. And we're like, hey, let's actually get it done before we even say a thing, because it would suck to hit the fifth continent and then just totally fail. But we started in Antarctica. We thought that was going to be the coolest jump. And in Antarctica, you met the most amazing people.
Really?
Like, oh, dude. Well, one, everyone except for us, because we're a bunch of poor vets, we're like these high net worth guys. You had influencers. You had guys from SpaceX. You had two famous UK like adventure TV stars on Nat Geo, Ben Fogle and Dwayne Fields. We had a blast.
Because you would think Antarctica's got like 10 people hanging out.
Oh, I know. The pigeon walks right
the
past
pigeons
you.
walking with the egg while the mom's just sitting there the whole time.
What did throw me off is it was high noon the entire day. So you'd come out of your tent at like 3 a.m. and it's like it's noon here in Florida. Sun was out full stop or the entire time. So everything lined up because the Antarctica was the longest pole in the tent because the weather can change on a dime. And we jumped 2 hours before the 757 came in to pick us up. So that was like perfect timing. Go to Chile, jump in Santiago, and then we fly to Miami here. I know we're not in Miami, we're in West Palm Beach, but we fly to Miami. So it's a red eye out of Chile. So an hour and a half before we land in Miami, which is 6:30 a.m., the NOTAMs, because this was in January, we just did this, the NOTAM system, which regulates all civilian flights and private flights, goes down. The first time the NOTAM system had been down since 9/11.
Oh my God.
So we land and everyone turns on their phone and it was like, bloop, 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 bloop. They're like, flight's fucking canceled. What are you talking about? And so American Airlines, Missy Tonis, who works the American Airlines executive desk, this woman was instrumental into pulling this off. We're like, Missy, what do we do? She's like, all civilian flights are canceled. So we've got to go jump in Clewiston. Yeah. There's a
West.
Yes, and Spaceland Clewiston. And so we're like talking. We're like, okay, guys, what are we going to do? Because this is going to throw us off schedule, and we won't do this in 7 days. And we're throwing out solutions. What I love about this group is nobody's losing their cool. Nobody's swearing. They're like, our one Canadian special operations guy says, let me make some calls. And he made it happen. Some good Americans got us a private jet. And we flew commercial economy because we're jumping in honor of our fallen and trying to raise money. So we're not going to get a private 757. So optics on this are very important to us. Mm-hmm. So we then come back to Miami at a private airport. The G5 comes in, we board, and it's like a bunch of just rednecks boarding a G5 that looks so out of place. And the stewardess is like, here's the rich guy.
Man?
Yeah, who's the rich guy here? And we're like, none of us are rich.
We're just about to jump.
Yeah. So we get to Barcelona, and we have very little time in Barcelona. And when we get to Barcelona, the cloud deck is at 1,000 feet.
And so everybody knows, what's a cloud deck?
So if you look up and you see clouds, usually, they're thousands of feet in the air on a clear day.
Yeah.
Well, this one's at 1,000. So it means the airfield, the drop zone is socked in. Oh, so it goes from 1,000, very thick, all the way up to 3,000. And so in America, under the USPA, the United States Parachute Association guidelines, you can't jump. But we're not in America. We're in Barcelona. So we go up to 13,000 in this tiny porter. No. And I'm at the very back, and I'm like sandwiched. And the guys are looking down. They're like, we can't see where the drop zone is. And so they look at the pilot. We've got GPSs. We trained to this. And we're like, where are we? She's like, we're exactly over the drop zone. And guys are like, all right, let's do it. And I'm like, get out. Just get out. So we jump. And 3 guys of the 9 didn't, I think 3 or 4 did not make the drop zone, but they identified a big farm field, and they all landed together in that farm field. That's called identifying an out. They followed protocol perfect. And then we moved on to Egypt, which you saw that jump. where we're over the pyramids.
Yeah.
That went viral right there.
Now, how cool was that?
That was the coolest jump of all of them. And I would do that again in a heartbeat.
So you saw the pyramids and everything.
Oh, dude, we're looking down. So that's me at the very top. You can see our heads are all looking down, not at each other. We're looking down at that. Now, that's Andy Stumpf to the right. He broke the wingsuit records. He jumped at 35,000 feet. So Andy's sort of a daredevil idiot. I've given you, yeah. He's awesome, dude. He's the co-founder of Legacy Expeditions. So he got as close to the tip of the pyramid, which is, if you climb the pyramid, you're going to jail.
Yeah.
And he was like something like 50 feet off the tip of the pyramid. He's got it on video. It's
I don't
awesome.
think you want to go to jail there,
Yeah,
right?
that's just Andy. And then we landed on a golf course just south of the pyramids, on to Abu Dhabi, where Abu Dhabi is Asia. People are like, oh, that's the Middle East. Yes, the Middle East is Asia. So that knocks out Asia. We set the 6-continent record there. The previous record was 8 days. 8 days, 7 hours, and like 14 minutes. We did it in 4 days, something like 8 hours in minutes. And then we went on to Australia, Perth.
Oh, that's cool.
And when we landed, here's the thing, 777, we did it 6 hours. 6 days, 6 hours and 6 minutes. 777 666.
666.
I think that's God telling us, yeah, I'll give you this one, guys. Stop what you're doing. And then we came back here to Tampa, which is the home of the U.S. SOCOM, and jump. But the best part of this was not the world records. Nobody really cares. And world records cost a lot of money. If you didn't know that, it's in my opinion, a racket.
Yeah. Like everything else.
Yeah. But we jumped in memory of one of the fallen on every continent.
Oh,
and
cool.
so
Cool.
it was somebody that somebody knew.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
on Antarctica, I jumped for Michael Mansour, who saved my life by jumping on a grenade. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. And I kept mine short. There was a quote he sent his mom to Asage's mom when we were in the Battle of Ramadi. He said, hey, Mom, don't worry. I'm with the boys, and that's as good as it gets.
Man.
Simple as that. And other guys talked about the guys that they served with right before we get on the plane to jump in that location. And that's what the best part was, that feeling that camaraderie again. And hearing those stories about how these guys impacted their lives. And now it's on to the next one. We're going to find something equally as stupid and give it our best shot.
That's very cool, because at first you just see the headline, oh, you guys did the thing, but you did it for a really special reason, not for the Guinness World Record book or whatever. You did it for each of you had somebody special that you did it for.
So what matters now is Dan Myrick, the director and producer of the Blair Witch Project, which just smashed all indie records. He and a documentary film crew that he was leading followed us, the entire team. And they were equally wore out. You can see it because Dan, I think, just turned 60, and you're like, the lack of sleep was killing him as well. And our only guidance to Dan was, Dan, tell the stories of the guys that we jumped in honor of.
That's awesome.
And keep their legacy alive. Do their families proud. And so Legacy Expeditions that Andy and I and Nick founded, we want to take veterans that are still alive, tell their story as well, but tell the story about somebody who impacted them who didn't come home. And the second we stop telling their stories, that's when their legacies die.
Right.
So, but also for the vets that go on these, dude, funny enough, like you saw like a different life in these guys. They felt that brotherhood again, that esprit de corps. But funny enough, when we all got home, guys were texting each other and they're like, hey man, I'm a little depressed. So we gave it to them, and then it's like we yanked it away again. And so everyone went, to include myself, went through a little depression of that high, followed by that low that it was over. And now we've sort of settled back to a baseline. And all I can hope is that baseline comes up a little higher with each of these for the guys that do it sort of on a repeat basis.
I get it now, because you're so, when you're doing that, it's a team that you can trust. There's loyalty. There's we always talk about loyalty. There's everything, and then you come back down, whether you're all here or wherever you are, and then you come back down, and it's back to this I thing, and guys like that, like Andy, I've seen you with Andy a lot. Guys like that you could put your wife around. You could give them $2 million, and all $2 million is going to be there. Or how about just you have a cold and he brings you, medicine, just something simple. Loyalty, right? Integrity to your friends, or like a real friend.
Loyalty? What?
Loyalty as
No, I don't know what loyalty is.
you don't know what loyalty is? I don't believe you for 2 seconds on that one.
The point
Pull
I'm
my
making
leg
is,
on that one.
Yeah, it just, it's so rare
So
these
rare.
days.
So rare.
Well, you know, I go back. A lot of the stuff you're saying, I keep hearing the same word, and it's in my head. Team, team, team. We, team. I always say to him, he knows this. My kids play, and I always bring my kids up and coaching and all that type of stuff. But I think all kids should have to play a team sport. I don't care what sport it is, basketball, baseball, football, soccer. They should all have to play it because you learn how to coexist with people, how to work together, how to have that person's back. And we don't have that anymore. It's been separated, and it's sad because it is all me, 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 me. You know, that's all it's about, and it's not about the, you know, you need people in your life, and you need people to support you, and you support them, and be loyal to them, and then be loyal to you. But you got people that stab you in the back because it's all about them. We've lost the we.
I mean, this is the reason that Enterprise Rental Cars takes NCAA athletes into the program. I'm sure there's a lot of, hey, they've shown commitment, discipline, self-accountability, but because they understand the aspect of team. I'm not so sure the NIL is helping with that with collegiate sports now that the transfer portal, they can just jump ship, but it's not reinforcing that well. But dude, the hardest thing for me with that transition out was finding a culture where you felt the team. Quite frankly, I didn't find it. So I'm like, I'm just going to start my own company. And I'm going to create that internally.
Yeah. Like we call it old school. Like we're looking for somebody who's old school, you know, like our dad, like his dad, my grandpa, that, you know, if I got in a fight, it wasn't, you got in trouble. He'd take me to look at the other kid and see what the other kid looked like. And if I looked worse, I took another one when I got home. You know what I mean? But that's, you know, but it made me, at the time I hated him, you know, and I didn't hate him, but at the time I'm like, what the fuck? But it gave me drive, you know, where you don't give up. You just don't give up, you know, and now it's tough to find that. And real quick, one last thing with the book, and then I'll ask you some other stuff. What in that book would you suggest to, because everywhere I look, and I always say this, but I don't get the right, I never get a satisfying answer. Everywhere you look, there are people are on the phone. Even when you're talking to them, they're going like this. You're having a serious conversation, and they can't wait to get on the phone. They go, what? And in my opinion, I think a lot of the problems that you address in your book and give very good ways to snap out of it. I think it starts with that phone. That's just my opinion. It starts with that phone and that social media and that filtered picture that you want to be this and I'm not this. Yeah, all that crazy.
Tommy loves to do TikTok dances. He's not telling you the
I don't
truth
even
there.
post. I'm a coder, so I know what. By nature, I'm a coder, so I can see the code. So I really know what TikTok does.
So I didn't watch the congressional hearings, but I heard that the TikTok CEO sort of handed our congressional leaders their asses during the hearings.
Well, I think he danced and they didn't know what to say.
They didn't know how to handle it.
I think it was probably what I think is I think they're all in cahoots, and I think I know they all do it, and then they blame China because that's the easy one to do.
Yeah.
But China's been doing it. But yet there was a balloon up there for 10 years that you didn't see it. You didn't see a balloon flying over and taking things for 10 years. We got all this technology, you know, and then unfortunately you see a bunch of presidents and $50 million houses on a $400,000 salary. You know, it seems to me, $10 trillion to Ukraine, who NATO said fuck you to how many times?
Squirrel.
Yeah, I don't know. Kind of looks to me like you're throwing some money to some of these countries, and I don't know, maybe it's coming around the back end.
Yeah, this is, you can't blame people for being disgruntled. It just, it doesn't look right. It doesn't smell right. It doesn't feel right. But
how do you get them out of that mindset? Because this book to me is about mindset.
So, and I know what you're referring to. So social media has some benefits. I do enjoy seeing some guys I served with, and I see the smile on their face with their family, and I just simply heart and say, "Hey, man, proud of you, brother." But yeah, there are some major. I mean, there's a whole subset of psychology being developed because social media is relatively new. Cell phones are relatively new. From FOMO, fear of missing out, to delayed gratification or instant gratification, to basically jealousy. Yeah. It breeds jealousy. Yeah. And what is the biggest thief of joy? is comparison. You're comparing yourself to other people's lives. So we're going to see a whole subset of psychology develop around social media. So I give people a challenge. And on Friday when I sign off, I tell them to do this. I say, hey, tonight, take one last look at social media. It could be 6 p.m., 5 p.m. on Friday. Put that thing down and don't check social media. If you're doing some adventure that you want to post on Monday, record it. Get out in nature. Yeah. Get out of your setting. Turn the TV off. And then on Sunday night, when you're prepping for the next day, if you want to turn that thing on and check out social media, do it. So try to go 48 hours. Now, if that's too much of a leap at first, sign off Friday night. Give yourself until like Saturday evening or Saturday afternoon, but give yourself that time. So we looked at the data, and this is disturbing. For this generation, by the time they turn like 65, they will have spent like 6 years on social media alone.
That's probably the low end, Mike. I mean, Jesus,
Could you imagine with what you can do within 6 years? If you had 6 years of your life back, if you wanted to pick up a martial art, you'd be a black belt within 6 years. If you wanted to start a business, if you wanted to become a pianist, if you dedicated yourself for that amount of time, you'd be an expert in almost anything.
And that's why you look at, and you'd say what you want about China and some of these other countries, but they limit it. And you look at it and you're like, okay, communist country, you look at some of the stuff, but you're like, that might be the right idea that what they're doing. I mean, they don't have to live on their phone like we do here, and I'm guilty of it myself. I mean,
I wish they'd limit it. I wish they cut that off at 6 p.m. every day.
Did you guys hear this one? They asked, it was a comparison data between, they asked children in the United States and children in China what they wanted to be when they grew up.
Yep.
Did you hear this one?
An astronaut, and I forgot what we were, an influencer, I think.
Yeah.
China was kids wanted to be astronauts. Yeah. Our kids, influencers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Somebody called me an influencer the other day, and I'm like, I am not an influencer. Yeah. Let's stop right there.
It looks like you're trying to uninfluence the negative.
Yes. Yes.
We're not talking about which apps are the best. You don't have Mike's 10 best warrior apps.
So I've got a great team. They're younger, and they're like, hey, Mike, your Instagram is not growing fast enough. And I said, okay, what do you guys want me to do about it? They're like, well, you need to show more personal stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. Nope. I'm like, I could target people, and my clan can target people off of social media alone and remove them from the face of the earth by the amount of information they put out. I'm like, I don't for my wife. I don't want to do it for my kids. And so they're like, yeah, your Instagram looks too commercial. It's just your podcast or your articles. And I said, so be it.
Be it. If you look at mine, all of them, it's just clips from the podcast. That's it. Nothing about not me out at dinner, not what I ate tonight. That's just not me. That's not me. That's my time.
I do show my dog occasionally, which is a Dutch Shepherd, just to convince people not to come into my house.
I think you've convinced them enough, but that might just be the topper. What initially made you want to go into the military and not, sports or doctor, lawyer, or whatever, when that actually mattered? This podcast is brought to you by Monster Energy. Tear into a can of the meanest energy drink on the planet, Monster Energy. It's the ideal combo of the right ingredients in the right proportion to deliver a big bad buzz that only Monster can. Monster packs a powerful punch, has a smooth, easy drinking flavor. Athletes, musicians, co-eds, road warriors, metalheads, geeks, hipsters, and bikers dig it. You will too. Monster Energy is more than just the green OG. Monster has Monster Ultra, Juice Monster, Monster Hydro, Rehab Monster, Dragon Tea, Monster Max, Muscle Monster, and many more. Buy on Amazon, buy on Walmart, or go to monsterenergy.com and believe me, you'll find a place. Unleash the beast. Monster Energy. When we grew up.
The best way to answer that, truthfully, up front, is Hollywood. Hollywood is the greatest military recruiting tool. And I know Hollywood sometimes does not like the military. It's like, what do you think you guys are doing? You're for some kids, you're over glamorizing the military, and that's the same for me. So watching certain movies, I'm like, damn, dude, those guys are tight. It's a team. They're going through hardship together. Like, did I ever want to kill anyone? No, but to be in something that intimate, I wanted to know what that felt like. And then ultimately, what drove me to enlist in the Marine Corps was I met a Force Recon Marine a guy named Staff Sergeant Post, and this guy was like God, what was he, about like 6'8"? No, I'm sorry, 5'8", just 180 and just a tank. And I wanted to be that dude. I think when I met him, I was 18, 19, 130 pounds, and the guy just embodied everything that you wanted to be. And the thing too that he was different than the other Marines I met was he was actually nice. So the other Marines were what we call POGs, person other than grunt. So they were support MOSs. And here you have this Force Recon Marine who has the dual cool, and he's nice and respectful to everyone. He doesn't need to beat his chest. Everyone knows he's the toughest guy in the room. And he had this humble confidence about him, this humble confidence that I talk about in the book. And even though he didn't call it, I sort of reflected and put a name on it, is humble that he didn't have all the answers, that he wasn't the best or smartest person in the room, that no matter what obstacles he ran into, he would figure it out. And he'd figure it out with a smile on his face. And basically said, hey, I want to do what you did. And so he's like, I'm a Recon Marine. He and another guy named Omar, because I fell into a bad way with college the first go around, helped me enlist in the Marine Corps. And I'm sure they got some money. I'm sure they got a kickback. I'm sure. So I need to find that out. Those guys need to give me a percentage. And that's how it happened. 1998, military recruiting was not like a hotbed. Clinton was in office. They were defunding or cutting the funding for the military. And bro, I loved it. I lacked focus. I lacked discipline. And then you go into Marine boot camp, and those drill instructors are impressive, dude. From how they dress, and the discipline and the accountability and how they conduct themselves. I'm like, I don't know if I have what it takes to be like that. And it was almost a challenge. And then I enjoyed being around the guys. And the reason I jumped from the Marine Corps to the SEALs is the Marine Corps was not part of SOCOM yet. When the war kicked off, SOCOM, the Green Berets, MARSOC wasn't around yet. The SEALs, Air Force Special Operations, Delta, Dev Group were all in the lead. They were at the front, the vanguard. And I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I've got to be at the vanguard. And
Recon Marine, you're doing some serious shit there too, though.
Yeah, and
give me a story with that. I mean, I looked, and but yeah, give us a story about. Man, that's some shit there, boy. That's not just like. Any Marine's impressive, all of them, but the Recon Marine, I've seen some cool shit.
So, switching from the Recon to the SEALs was interesting in itself. But I'll say this: to get into the Recon community, they had something called a INDOC. And so the entrance exams to get to the basic reconnaissance course, which is the school you go to become a Recon Marine, I think everything's changed. The initial standards were much harder to get into SEAL training. And SEAL training has now risen the entrance standards from intelligence to physical fitness and other things. But you had to actually run the Marine Corps PFT, which was 3 miles. And I think at the time for Recon, you had to get under 20 minutes. I was a good runner at the time because I was 130 pounds. I was light, and then max pull-ups, max sit-ups, and then you run the O course. You had to run the O course twice within, I think, like 3 minutes. And then you had to do all these calisthenics for time, and you had to hit so many reps. And then they put a rucksack with weight on your back, and you run 10 miles to a pool. Whew. And this is Camp Pendleton, so it's just rolling hills. Once you get to the pool, you're exhausted because you've run 3 miles. You just ran 10 with a rucksack. You have to swim 50 meters with a brick. You have to tread water with all these guys around you for 30 minutes with camis on. Like, they'll have you put your hands above the water at times. And the guy's right next to you, and he's kicking your legs as he's trying to stay afloat. And then the instructors will come, and they'll pull you down. It's called sharking, to see if you lose your oxygen for a little bit. If you freak out. After that 30 minutes, you run the 10 miles back, and you're done. Man. I could barely walk the next day. For the SEALs, they don't have a program like that. They basically, I think it's like 500 yard swim or 800 yard swim, a mile run. And so the standards to get into BUDS were not as difficult back then. But BUDS itself, compared to Recon training, it's the military's most difficult training for the factor of the cold in the water. That's what gets guys. Is you are uncomfortable the entire time, and you are freezing. And that is just too much for guys to take. I respect all special forces communities or special operations communities. I got to be a guest instructor at the special forces qualification course. Those guys blew me away. when people are like, "Hey, so who's the toughest?" The question is flawed, and it's sort of like a juvenile, immature question. There were Green Berets that I'm like, God, that guy's top notch. There were MARSOC guys that I'm like, that guy's top notch. There were SEALs that I'm like, guys are top notch. Tier 1 is at a different level. But then there's SEALs that I'm like, same about Green Berets that I worked with, questionable. So if you were to put together the Rainbow Six of teams, it would have people from all communities, mainly JSOC. But yeah, I'm humbled for the time I served with all those guys, from SEALs to Special Forces to MARSOC. As a whole, totally impressed me.
And when you were still doing the recon, when you were out wherever they sent you, what was a time when it was like real close or exciting, or what was your favorite? I don't know if you want to call it favorite, but what was one that was a good one that you can talk about?
So I never went to war with the Marines, so I missed it from '98 to '03. I just missed the war.
They didn't send you.
No. And they sent me back to school, and that's how I became an officer.
Gotcha.
And switched over to the SEAL teams. But sniper school, I'll say, was the toughest school for me, because remember, I'm a kid from the Bay Area, hadn't really been in nature all that much, and the shooting phase was not the difficult part of sniper school. And in boot camp, I qualified expert. Just listen. I mean, Marine Corps rifleman or rifle instruction is the best in the world. If you do what they say, you're going to crush it. But sniper school, the shooting part wasn't the toughest part. It was the stocking. And so you actually, because the Marine Corps is cheap as hell, before you go into sniper school, you have to create a ghillie suit. And I got quick notification that, like, hey, you're checking into sniper school, like not this week, but the next week. And you got to build a ghillie suit. So I go home, I drive home from San Diego to my parents' house. I'm like, Mom, we got to build a ghillie suit. So we went out and got canvas. We got a pair of chemis, this netting, and this burlap sack, which you tear into strands. And at the end of the weekend, God bless my mom, it looked like we had created a Chewbacca suit, a walking Chewbacca. And the sniper instructors were laughing when they go through all your gear on day one. They're like, what unit are you with? I'm like, 1st Recon Battalion. They're like, how much notice, or have you done any sniper work? And I'm like, no. They're like, yeah, it shows. So I had to cut a lot of the burlap out. They took me to the side. They had me getting in water and rolling around in the mud, putting me, which is, like hazing. And ultimately I got paired with a kid from Montana. Yeager was his last name. And I need to find this guy. I believe it was Brian Yeager. And so he had hunted all his life. And stalking is where most of the people go home. And we're going home in groves. Every day people are going home. So I think we started with like 40 and we graduated like 12.
And what makes them go home? Well, what is the hardest thing when do they throw in the towel?
They get kicked out because they don't meet the standard. So it's the stalking, because you've got trained scout snipers on scopes looking for you.
Oh.
And I think I failed my first 2, and I'm like, oh boy. And it came down to my last stock, and Brian had already passed on his 7th. I think you get 10 stocks. He'd already passed on his 7th or 6th try. And he helped me get into position on the last one and sacrificed himself. And I barely made it through by the skin of my teeth. And then you end up in Iraq where, I'm a SEAL officer, but I'm also a sniper. And there was no stalking there. You basically set up in a building in a room, and it's heyday from there. But I mean, wild times with the SEALs. I don't regret making that switch. Going through the training, I had to just shut my mouth, because it'd be like, hey, how's this compared to Recon? And it would just be like, much tougher.
How do you get the opportunity to go to the SEALs? Because you're with the Marines and then you're making the jump to the SEALs. That's a very select few, correct?
So I actually went to Marine OCS, which was a kick in the July and August in Quantico, Virginia, and I actually finished Honor Man. At OCS, finished Honor Man at boot camp. I did what I was told, and I would push it to the limit, and I had a very good career in the Marine Corps. And that set me up to get my application into the SEALs of hey, he was the Honor Man at Marine OCS. And what people don't know a lot of people don't know is the Marine Corps is part of the Department of the Navy. We call it the men's department of the Navy. It's a running joke. So they couldn't stop me. The Marine Corps couldn't stop me from putting an inter-service transfer in to become a SEAL officer.
Gotcha.
Now, what I'm told is that there was a Force Recon Marine that did it the year before I did, and then I did it the year after him, that we both switched over to the SEALs, and that they put some clause in there that if you take the MECEP program, the Marine Enlisted Commissioning Education Program, you cannot switch to the Navy as an officer. So we ruined it for everyone. But hey, I got mine. No, I'm joking. So yeah, it wasn't as difficult as I thought. You just had to read through the sort of the publications and the rules and regulations, and then figure it out and put an application in. And I had a great Marine officer, a guy named at the time I think it was Major Rodriguez, and he retired to Colonel. And he's like, "Hey man, military's going to get their pound of flesh one way or the other. Do what you want to do in the military." The colonel that was in charge of Texas A&M did not have the same thoughts, and he called me disloyal and a traitor, and you know, Major Rodriguez is like, just take it on the chin, man. Tell the emperor his robes look nice, and he's like, go do your thing, man. And so I ran into then Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez in Ramadi in 2005, and I got my trident, and he's like, "I'm proud of you, man. I'm proud of you." But it was funny before, because he discharged me as a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and he commissioned me as an ensign in the Navy, and he gave me one piece of advice. And it was meant to be a joke, but we all know there's an ounce of truth in every joke. He said, "Hey, man, don't fail buds or you'll embarrass the Marine Corps." And I'm on my knees. Well, I've got my hands on my knees. I am laughing, crying, and he's laughing as well. And I'm like, I needed that. That gave me perspective. So when I went to buds, it wasn't even a choice. And what I focused on in buds is, one, I had the respect of the other 250 students. One, this guy's, I had my dive bubble. I've already become a combatant diver. That doesn't matter. I still have to go through second phase of buds, scout sniper. And I just led. I focused on leading and helping out as many guys as I could through buds. And that sort of just took my mind off of the bullshit of being a student and having to listen to certain like buds instructors that, you just don't respect as a person. A lot of them were great instructors, but there was a few that you're like, yeah, I can tell he's not respected by the other instructors. And in my mind, it was just like, the war's going on. Get through the training as quickly as possible. Don't be a retread, meaning you failed at something and you've got to go back and start over. Just get to your SEAL team, go to war.
What was give one or two things that were just complete torture in the training for the SEALs? Because we always hear stories, but you never really hear firsthand. I mean, book, whatever, but it's cool to hear from, like, drowned you, freeze you, they play with your mind a lot, right?
Yeah. Your body is resilient. Your body, especially in the 20s, can just keep going and going and going. Your mind will break long before your body. And that's how the training is run, to get inside your head. So remember, my experience is different than the 99% who have no military experience coming in. So I think I remember the one moment I had was there was this one instructor that I just, again, you saw the way the other instructors handled or dealt with him, and he was just, I just did not like this guy. And so during Hell Week, which Hell Week is interesting, that is no joke. That's Mantown.
And what all does Hell Week consist of?
So Hell Week,
Can't imagine.
Hell Week is in first phase. There's 3 phases. Each of them are 2 months long. But you also go through something called PTRR, which is to prepare you to go to buds, which is 1 month long. So that's 1 month before phase 1. And I think it was like around week 5 in phase 1. So now that's basically 8 weeks into the whole process. The 9th week is Hell Week. And you've already, from the 250, you're already probably at like 200. 50 guys have already quit. And it starts on Sunday, and it is 5 days until Friday afternoon of basically zero sleep, moving nonstop, wet, cold, and sandy. And your camis, your camouflage utilities, become like sandpaper. And so by Monday afternoon, you've got these open sores everywhere that every time you hit the salt water, they sting. I mean, guys are like I had tears coming out of my eyes by like Tuesday, Wednesday, because every time it just stings. And whenever you have to go to the bathroom, you usually want to hit the water. So it's painful. And when you always have to go what we call swim buddies. So guys like, hey, I need to go use the ocean. You're like, oh,
not again, right?
So
no sleep for 5 days straight.
So they give you, I want to say like
how do you sleep?
2 1 hour or 2 2 hour periods. But I'll say this, I tried to sleep the first go around. And when you can't enter into REM, You know how like you've tied one on, you finally go to bed at like 4 a.m. and you're like, I gotta get up at 6.
Yeah.
You wake up at 6 and you just feel awful. That's how you felt. So a lot of guys in the second, when the second rest comes around, they're like, God, no, I'm good. I'm just gonna stay up. And yeah, you sort of do the bob for knob as we call. But it was one night they have us up on this berm, and that instructor who I dislike is leading it, and they have us waving as the sun as it's setting, and it's goodbye sun, hello darkness, it's gonna be cold. Goodbye sun, hello darkness, it's gonna be cold. And he was just running his mouth, and I had this other just officer next to me, good dude, man. And I think he's still active duty, so I won't say his name. And I'm like, I'm gonna fucking knock this motherfucker out. Like, I'm fucking done with this. And he basically looked at me. He's like, dude, just shut up. And I just shut up. And that was my moment. I remember my moment of weakness. And it literally took one buddy to just say, sort of reframe it, just say, shut up. Just Charlie Mike, continue movement, man. And it was fine. But I was impressed by the process. The guys who I thought were gonna make it didn't. And funny enough, I had this kid in my class, first generation Korean American, small guy, sort of very like passive. Not I want to say passive in nature. It's just the way he talked. You're like, oh, this guy's passive. And I thought he wasn't going to make it. And on Hell Week, I'm looking down the line when we secure. There's like, I think there was 25 of us left at the end. I look down, and there's that little Asian kid. I'm like, huh. All right, kid's hard, man. And go to SEAL Team 3 together. He goes and becomes a special operations medic. And we deploy to the Battle of Ramadi in 06 together, where I literally watch him do this. He runs out and pulls a Iraqi soldier that's been wounded out of the street, for which he's awarded the Silver Star. And then he and I go back to the Battle of Sadr City in 08, where he's awarded the Bronze Star for valor. And then he wanted to become an officer, so the Navy said, okay, put in an application. He did, and they sent him to the University of San Diego, where he finished with a 3.99 in mathematics. Of course, at that point, you send the person back to a SEAL team. And he said, I'd really like to go become a Navy doctor, and the Navy needs doctors. And they said, okay, where do you think you can get in? It's like, I applied to Harvard and I got in.
This kid, huh?
Becomes a Harvard-educated doctor. Doesn't stop there.
Shoot.
After 3 years of being a doctor, he puts in an application to NASA. Now, NASA gets like 18,000 applicants a year, and they choose like 12. And he's one of 12 selected, Jesus. All by the age of 34.
Wow.
Navy SEAL, Silver Star, Bronze Star, Harvard doctor, NASA astronaut, all by the age of 34. His name is Dr. Johnny Kim. And I think he's in line for the Mars mission. I don't know how that works, but the most humble dude. And what's interesting is we talk about, don't judge a book. He went on the Jocko podcast, and I'd never known this. And I've known Johnny since 2003. And we found out that his dad was an alcoholic. He was abusive in his senior year of high school. He called the cops on his dad, and he told his dad, you need to get out of the house. And his dad went into the attic in Johnny's room. So when the police are there, Johnny goes into his room, and he sees the attic door sort of out of place. Tells the police, hey, I think my dad is still in the house. His dad had a pistol, I believe. And there was a standoff, and his dad was shot and killed. And so Johnny never told us that until later in his life. And I'm sure he held the guilt or felt the guilt as if he was responsible for his dad's death. Just an amazing individual. And so that's why, like, when I talk about the SEALs, people want to hear my stories. I always talk about the other guys.
Right.
But I'm sure we're going to get to some great combat stories here, which are all embarrassing. All embarrassing. You ask a funny story, and I was laughing. In Iraq in 08, during the Battle of Sadr City, we would stage in Baghdad because it was a real nice palace. And we'd drive the hour 15 to Sadr City to do our missions. Except I stayed forward by myself to embed with the Army to scout out different locations that we could take as sniper positions. On one of the times I went back to Baghdad, we had a mission. We were driving back out to Sadr City. Well, this guy's on active duty, but he was a Texas football player. Big boy, 6'4", like 270. How he passed buds, like nobody knows, but he's like one hell of an athlete. This is the only guy I've ever seen that kicked in a double bolted steel door where we have sledgehammers. He's like, move. And he just kicks it. The guy was in the machine gun he would carry, looks like a M4 in my hands. Great dude. He was at my wedding. And he's aggressive, to say the least. And so he's in the very front of like an 8-vehicle convoy. And we have these RGs, which are now these up armored vehicles. And there's
Your
a
face when you
yeah, there's a car of a pickup truck of Iraqi police officers, and you don't want to sit in any one position in your vehicle with the amount of people that we had around us on the streets. And so what does he do? He rams the Iraqi police vehicle out of the way. And I forget what vehicle I'm in, because somebody comes over the radio and they're like, Mike, I think we got a problem. I guess Iraqi policemen went flying out of the bed.
Oh, boy.
And they're like, you need to come up here. And so I come up. He's like, what? I'm like, you idiot. And so he and I get into it a little, and it's just not the time or place. And so there's the Iraqi senior police officer. And I go up and I'm starting to talk, and people are starting to crowd around, Iraqi civilians. And I'm talking to this guy through an interpreter, and we're about this close. And I turn around, and as I'm turning around, the police officer, to get the people away, pulls his pistol. So I'm now looking this direction, and he pulls his pistol, aims it into the air, and fires 3 shots. This close. And I've never, I still don't know how my pants were dry. But I remember the look on my face must have been the just dumbest look, because I'm going for my pistols. I'm turning around. I have it out of the holster, and I see it's him. Put it back in, and I remember my nerves were just shot for minutes. But it's always, nothing is like the movies. It doesn't look cool. There's a movie called Act of Valor. I've still not seen the entire thing. I've seen some scenes where guys are like sliding on a knee while firing their gun. It's not like that. Guys are tripping everywhere. We're on nods at night. You have guys on a ladder on a wall, and the ladder starts to fall, and they fall like 12 feet, break their nods.
Get up.
It was never pretty. It was never pretty. But guess what? All we had to do was be better than the enemy, and we always won. Our soldiers, even though the outcome of the war was bad, and it was bad for which there's still no accountability with regards to Afghanistan and the lessons learned, not for the point of passing or pointing fingers and passing blame, but gathering the true lessons that we learned and passing it to the next generation to say, don't do what we did, or learn from this and fight the next war better. But our soldiers won every battle they were tasked with. Bottom line, they did. And often, sometimes outnumbered, outgunned, and still found a way to beat the enemy back and win.
What was, with you and your team, what was the toughest battle when you were in Afghanistan? Because that went on for, it got quiet on the news.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thought it was done. Oh yeah, we're bringing everybody back, and then next thing you know, you look and there's a gazillion people still over there. But when you were involved with all that, or even Iraq, what was a battle that, like you said, you guys came out victorious, but that was really close, and that your team really stuck together, and some crazy things happened, and like falling off ladders when bullets are flying. Really. I remember Tig. He was saying that. He was like, we didn't know, and next thing you know, there's crater bombs. We're calling for help. There's no help, and we had to make the decision to get out of there. Like things like that you had to go through.
There's 2.
For you and your team.
There's 2 that I'd love to bring up.
Sure.
So the first one was my very first mission in Afghanistan.
Oh, your very first one.
Very first one.
Right.
With the East Coast based SEAL team. And it was actually the night that Adam Brown was killed. They wrote a book about Adam called Fearless. And I've heard it's being turned into a movie. And if you hear the story of Adam, Arkansas boy, had the accent. First time I met Adam, I went to Texas A&M for my undergrad, California kid that ended up in Texas. And he came up, and he's got a fake eye, and which is throwing me off. Like, you can't look in the person's face because you're like, what's like, yeah. And he's like, hey, I heard you went to Texas A&M. I'm like, yeah. He's like, walked away. And I'm a new guy at this place. I'm like, oh God, did I just piss somebody off? So it's my first one. The radio man didn't have who was not a SEAL, did not have the physical prowess to make the missions in Eastern Afghanistan because of the mountains. So I'm comms, I'm a JTAC. The officer who, he looked at me, and it was a friend, Jonas Kelsaw, who was killed on Extortion 17, the next deployment. Most of these guys were. I said, hey, you went to comm school? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you're in. And so the rest of the deployment, I was the comms guy for Jonas, and he was a great dude. We won. It took them like 2 weeks to find a route into a valley in Konar province, which, if you look, like the majority of the medals of honor were won in Konar province, because the terrain was so bad. It was advantageous to the enemy. It was their home turf. So it takes 2 weeks to find a route, and the route that they find in is not an easy one. So we end up fast roping onto
And
it.
it took 2 weeks because there was just enemies everywhere.
So believe it,
just nowhere to go.
Enemy everywhere. Believe it or not, this is 2010, and no Americans had stepped into this valley for the history of the war. That's insane. There's a valley that Americans had never been in because it was so remote. And so that's what you call a safe haven for the enemy because they know it. So they find a mountaintop that we have to fast rope onto. And so they even, they connect the dog to the fast rope, and they have a pulley system. They lower the dog. I mean, it's interesting to watch this. And I don't want to get too much into capabilities and
Sure.
capacities, but so I get on the fast rope, and I've got the big radio, and I go down, and my ankle just sort of twists when I hit the ground.
Ugh.
So the thing about the fast rope is somebody's coming down right behind you. And so I crawl off, and I call the doc. And this is my first mission. I don't want to be the guy that has to get extracted, and possibly they have to call the mission off. So I'm like, hey, dude, I think it's broke. And he looks at it, he's like, it's not broke, but it's pretty bad sprain. And so he gave me some, I think it was Tramadol, and just like tighten the laces down really tight. And he's like, yeah, it should go numb in a while. It was so painful, and it was a long route in. And we finally get to the target after like 6 or 8 hours of hiking, and guys are exhausted. That's how bad this
6 or 8
terrain.
hours of hiking with basically a broken ankle.
It was a sprained ankle, but it did go numb after a few hours.
Well, at least it went numb.
And we get to the target, and this is a very bad guy, and all hell breaks loose. So we're on. It's interesting. They put these houses on the sides of mountains, and then they cultivate the sides of mountains and basically have crops, and the whole valley just starts firing in our direction, and all hell breaks loose. And I'm like, what the hell? And so since I've got F-18s, there's an Air Force CCT. I start dropping bombs on the other side of the valley where we're taking fire, which I got in trouble because I was dropping rounds through the stack of aircraft that were lower than the F-18. I heard that when I got back, and technically, per the publications and regulations, the guy who was yelling at me, he wasn't yelling, is absolutely right. But do I regret the decision? No. We were taking fire from everywhere.
Yeah.
Adam was hit pretty quickly. And so we've got to get off the side of a mountain. They killed the high level guy we were going after, but now you've got a casualty. And when you have a casualty, and Adam was not a small boy, it usually takes like 4 to 6 guys to carry that casualty off. Jeez. But now you have to get off the side of the mountains where it's like an 8-foot drop, cultivated crop for about 50 yards, and then another 8-foot drop. And we had to get down like 15 of those drops.
Wow.
And so I'm falling off, and I've got this X-wing, this thing that looks like an X. It's an antenna for SATCOM. By the end of the mission, I had 1 of the 4 tails left. But I watched these guys lower Adam's body down those drops while they're getting shot at, totally dismissing the fact that there was fire coming from everywhere, as if it was like Jesus Christ himself, and making sure that they were handling Adam's body with care. And that's the damnedest thing I've ever seen.
Very cool. They're like the hell with the bullets. We're getting this body down.
They loved him. And it was a bad night. I remember one of the guys, more senior guys, came to me. He's like, that's probably one of the worst missions we've ever pulled off in Afghanistan as a unit. It was that the terrain was that difficult. And then, we did not anticipate getting fired from all those locations at that rate. The next one was my second deployment, where, and I actually got investigated for this by NCIS. God bless our government. The guy wrote a book about the Bin Laden raid, and in it, wrote that the raid was launched from Jalalabad, where I was stationed in 2012. And there was a retaliation for that just so happened to be when my team was there. And I was the strike force commander for Jalalabad. And 5 a.m., we're going to bed because we operate at night, and a VBIED, a vehicle-borne IED, goes off at a gate. We share a gate with an adjacent compound, a different organization than us, and the windows and doors to our where we sleep just blew open, and you knew this explosion. I fell on sort of like looking dumb, just falling back from the shock, and I end up on my butt. And so I run to the gear room, I grab my stuff. Somebody's like, hey, stay, let's get a head count. And I'm like, get to the tower, man. It was right by the tower. And I run to the tower, which is manned by, I believe it was like Kentucky National Guard. and there's rounds coming into the tower, and I mean the poor Kentucky National Guard. These they do this 1 weekend a month, and they are all down. And so right when I get in there, two of them I'm like, "Hey, get out!" And so they climb down the ladder, and I nailed two guys right by the gate who turned out to have suicide vests. So they were looking towards the gate. I came up behind them in the tower and hit him, and then hit a guy who was firing a machine gun. He did sort of the skip, so probably killed him as well, or severely wounded him. But there was 15.
This episode is sponsored by Aurora. Do you know what the fastest growing crime in America is? For years, this crime rate has been surging and affecting millions of Americans. I'm talking about identity theft, and there's a new victim every 14 seconds. Yet despite this, those who have had their identity stolen are often shocked when it happens. That's why I'm excited to partner with Aurora, who is sponsoring this video. Aurora is identity theft protection, fraud monitoring, a VPN, password management, and antivirus software all into one easy-to-use app. Their VPN allows you to stay anonymous online by keeping your browsing history and personal information safe and encrypted. Protect you and your family from America's fastest growing crime. Try Aurora for free for 2 weeks and see if you or anyone in your family's personal information has been compromised. Start your free trial today. Go to aurora.com/MSCS. The link is in the description below.